All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. It is 12 noon here in the East Coast, but to wherever you are around the world, whatever time of day, hope it's going great. We are here to talk about a very interesting subject, which are Sitecore upgrades at scale, as we jokingly call it here, 10.x growth. So we're going to allow Lukasz and Camruz here to talk about that in just a moment, but we also do want to look out towards next week. There's going to be a whole lot of Sitecore activity happening. The three of us will all be on location there in Nashville, probably doing some honky tonk, as well as learning about all of Sitecore's great new features and upgrades of their own. And we would really look forward, anybody who's watching this right now, let us know if you'll be there in the comments. It's going to be a really good full week of Sitecore's future. But a big part here of Sitecore's present and past and carrying over are the need to do Sitecore upgrades. When we have versions, when we have on-prem, now it's going a little bit hybrid, bringing in elements of the new world from the old, but there are still a lot of on-premise Sitecore customers and a lot of need for upgrades. So I think at Konobos, we've done the math. We've done about 500 plus 500 site upgrades within Sitecore. Some customers have many sites, and that's the one we're going to talk about here, because doing one Sitecore upgrade is probably difficult and enough, and doing up to 200 at a time takes a lot of planning and forward-thinking, strategic thought. And Camruz and Lukasz here, my two of my other Sitecore MVP compadres here at Konobos, are going to walk through this. So, guys, thanks so much for coming on and doing this, and tell us about 10x growth after you introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, great to have everyone join us today. Really looking forward to meeting everybody at Symposium next week. I was just telling these guys a few months ago, it's actually my 10-year anniversary for Cycle Symposium. It's my first Symposium MVP Summit as well that I attended was in 2014 in Barcelona when we had those European events. But looking forward to catching up with everyone next week, including Lukasz himself, who will be joining as well. So, and I've never been to Nashville, so I always like to go visit new towns and new cities, and go check out some of the history and some of the music scene there, of course. Today, of course, we're here to talk about Sitecore upgrades. I myself have done many upgrades, and I'm sure Lukasz, you as well probably have done a huge number yourself.
Oh yes.
And I recall thinking about doing those first upgrades, and you think, it's just an upgrade. Who cares? It's going to be easy. It'll be done very quickly, and then experience gives you a good kick, and here we are, right? And that experience, of course, does help with these upgrades and the knowledge and future upgrades. And you learn what to look for, what not to look for, where you can skip and where you can jump, and how those things become easier. Let me move this on. So a little bit about myself. I'm Camruz German. A lot of you might know me from the community as Jammy Cam. I've been in the CMS and DXP space for over 15 years now. I've been in the IT industry for 25 years almost now. 25 years actually. Started as an intern back in 1999. And I'm a 12-time Sitecore MVP, and I'm also a Content.ai MVP.
And my name is Łukasz Skowroński. I also work with Sitecore for 13 years or something like that. 8-time Sitecore MVP. And when it comes to the CMS and DXP space, more than 15 years. To be honest, it's closer to 20 right now. But yeah, we are still counting.
Yeah, I don't think I've done some homegrown CMSs before Sitecore. I don't have. It's amazing how much experience people have in the CMS world. And when you start off in it, you think it's just very simple website builders, right? But then you get into what you can do with it and some of the complexity. It really is an amazing tool. And a little bit about Conobos. We were formed back in 2017 by myself and Akshay Sura, who wants to be everybody's friend, so hopefully you know him well. We are a dedicated and small team that is focused in the DXP, CMS and DXP space. We're well known within the Sitecore space, but we've been doing headless for quite some number of years now. Before headless became the big buzzwords, and we love the composable era. We love working with all the composable products, and Sitecore obviously has an extremely great offering within XM Cloud, CDP, personalized, order cloud search, for example. Our team is fully remote, so we're located around the globe, but we love working with the community. Community has been just part of our DNA. Those of you will know us from the community for well over a decade now. So let's get into upgrades. We've obviously gone through. Those of you that have been in the Sitecore space for a little while would have gone through these cycles of upgrades. You know, some of the history. Those of you that have been in the industry for a long time, like Lukash and myself, will know some of the hurdles that you had to go through in the earlier software versions to go through upgrades. You'll know the differences between XMXP in terms of upgrades, but hopefully you also will know some of the more recent history and how upgrades have come to be much easier these days. But why? Let's start with the why. And this is actually a really strange quarter for every year. This happens. This final quarter, a lot of our customers are looking at the Sitecore upgrades. Sitecore 10.4 was released back in April, just after we were there at SubCon, right? I don't know what happened to my camera.
Around that date, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to my camera. Hopefully I'll come back in a second. But it was around that date that it got released. We know we had actually done a webinar back then as well, telling people of the benefits of the software version, what some of the new features are, why they should upgrade. And those were a little bit more proactive or had been waiting and pushed things off a little bit were starting the upgrade process much earlier in this week, or at least starting this plan of this year, or at least planning those upgrade phases. But then what happens is that final quarter rolls around and people are like, oh no, we're getting to the end of support, so we have a bit of an urgency to hit towards the end of the year. Some others are actually planning for the end of the year specifically because they know they have essentially a shutdown throughout their organization for deployments and things like that, for especially the second half of December over the Christmas period. So they want to hit that as their cutover, their rollover, their switchover, if you like, to the latest version. We know there's a lot of security enhancements, and we'll discuss that a little bit. But there's been obviously a number of patches and things like that throughout the year or the years, and then just security enhancements in third-party libraries that Sitecore uses within its own instance. There's always performance and stability improvements. This is just part of the course where Sitecore is making a lot of improvements from feedback they're getting or new technology that they're introducing, or just removing old bits of code which allows them to improve their current code base and just remove some technical debt, if you like. There's obviously a lot of new features over the years, some big, some much smaller, but they're always just making our lives as developers, our lives as content marketers, our lives as DXP users much, much quicker. And of course, you want to take advantage of those features for your own, against your own competition, and even just to streamline your own workforce, your own teams and your content teams.
Yeah, on that slide, we want you to focus first on the definitions that are on the right side before you take a look at the table. So this is the data that is shared by Sitecore on the Sitecore product support lifecycle page. And And on the right, you have the definition of the mainstream support, which gives you a full support, basically. Extended support that gives you security patches when they are released, and there are at least few every single year that you want to apply to your Sitecore solutions. And the last one, which is sustaining support, gives you only a chance to ask for questions related to the Sitecore upgrade, right? After that, you have to pay for any support you need if Sitecore find people that can actually help you, right? Because the longer you wait, the biggest problem it is to get any support from anyone. So now, when we are on the same page when it comes to the definition, please take a look at the table. So the red square shows when and for which version the support ends, right? So on the right side, we've got sustaining support, and it shows that for Sitecore 8.2, you won't be able to even ask for upgrade-related questions with the end of this year, right? For the extended support, you can see that 9.1 will be supported till end of this year, and with the security patches, right? So after that date, if you're on a older version, there will be no like Sitecore packages or Sitecore patches provided to you, and that's a huge security risk. And for 10.2, the mainstream support will end also this year, right? So those are the like important dates for those specific versions. If you want to check your particular version, you can always find that on Sitecore website, and like make sure that you are in a safe spot. All right, let's move on to the next slide, Cam. Yeah, so here is the example of the list of security patches provided by Sitecore. The list that you see here is like 5 or 6 for the latest Sitecore versions. I think that those patches were released in last year or around that time. So you can easily find that. On the right, you also see the filtering options. So if with your particular version, you can filter it out and see what patches were provided for your version, and if you can double check if you have all of that applied to your instance to be sure that you are on a safe side. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Yes, so we did a quick review of the latest releases. You probably know that Sitecore within all of the versions provides also release notes. So we went through those release notes to see how many improvements actually Sitecore released during those latest releases. And as you can see, right, the latest one provides more than 100 improvements, provides also new tools. For 10.3, in total, there are again more than 100 improvements, and also some new tools for SXA and new components supporting Next.js. So in total, if you are on 10.2, it gives you more than 250 improvements, and also increase your increase a chance to use the newest cutting edge tools that Sitecore provides. Yeah, that's basically it. I think we can move to the next slide. And here we have some of the features that we listed out based on our experience, based on the release notes, features that you may be missing in your instance if you stayed behind, right? If you didn't do the upgrades on time. So you can see here like configuration roles, for instance, that allows you to better organize the configuration changes that you are doing. You can see here SXA, right, that helps you to build websites faster and within the industry standards. You can see GDPR or PII data support, right? So those really important things. Or what else actually? CLI, for instance, right? This is a big thing that allows you to use new and still support the serialization features that, and if you remember, probably you remember those older tools like TDS or Unicorn, they are no longer supported by anyone, right? So if you want to be on top, if you want to have use the latest tool set, then you have to be updated, upgraded to the latest cycle versions. Cam, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think the cycle serialization is a great tool. I think Unicorn is still supported by the community, by Mark Cassidy specifically. But if you want official support from Sitecore, this is a great tool, and that hooks directly into the CLI. We have, I think some of the things that we've been doing specifically, we've been seeing that people take great advantage of when they're upgrading, is the move to content serialization, cycle content serialization. The use of the configuration roles, especially from the older version, it just makes the setup of the instances much easier, and makes configuration as you're developing your own features much easier. Dynamic placeholders, I know it came out a little while ago, but it depends on which version you're coming from, has been really great to have official support for that. I know there was some community versions of this around, but some of them worked well, some of them not so well. And then you're kind of battling against the official one versus the old one and migrating and things like that. The other ones that we've seen people moving heavily into is the use of the identity server for single sign-on, connecting those up into their Azure Active Directory instances. So you're not having to have separate logins for the different users, and everything's a much more seamless experience for them. And PAS support, again, I think in the much older versions, it wasn't officially supported. In, I think, 9 onwards, they had the official cycle support, full cycle support for this, which has been great for people to migrate off of virtual machines and on-prem, fully on-prem data centers, moving into cloud instances, which makes it much more scalable for them. And then in the much newer versions, it's like the webhooks and the APIs for the management that they released really opened up the instance to make it much more API driven, much more cloud, much more it fits much more seamlessly with the headless features, what we'd expect with headless features. And you can take advantage of it from other systems, iPaaS systems, or just using some little Azure functions to offload some work off your servers. But there's a lot of advantages that can be taken that you can take in terms of the features, but it's also a good opportunity to improve some of your own processes. So let's get into planning your upgrade, because this is obviously a big challenge that, like I mentioned before, running into my first upgrade, I was like, yeah, it's I've read the documentation. This seems pretty easy. I just gotta go and install this package and update this few files here and there. But we know that it's much more of a multifaceted task that is involved, especially so when you're dealing with instances at scale. As Matt mentioned earlier, we've been working on some upgrades with hundreds of sites on that one instance. It spans multiple different environments. You're talking about development teams spanning tens, sometimes 50 team members, globally distributed, and you're talking about so many different people involved at so many different levels. And there's obviously, during this time, there's constant development. But you're talking about, the data itself, which integrations do we have? The code base, what version are we going from, or what version of Sitecore are we going to? What does the code base look like in terms of how it's set up, the architecture? What release strategies and processes do they have in place? There's been a lot where we go in and there is no automated releases. So everything is done manually. And that itself is obviously painful from a release perspective, but it's also painful from what you're dealing with in terms of the different states of the different code bases of the different environments, and a lot of times things are done manually on each different environment. So that's another task that you need to tackle. Figuring out who your upgrade team is. Sometimes that's a different team from the BAU, the business as usual team, the team that's actually continuing to provide features and enhancements to the current platform. You need to figure out who all the stakeholders are and get them involved, get them onto the timeline, get their and figure out what their priorities are, because different stakeholders, especially that scale, are going to have different priorities and different deadlines, sometimes different regulatory deadlines that they're trying to hit and trying to aim for, and sometimes that may clash or coincide with the timelines and the timeframes that you're trying to hit at the same time. And then we'll also talk about a little bit about infrastructure, because that can be a whole another set of issues depending on how much infrastructure you have, who the infrastructure team is, and what infrastructure they're dealing with. If it's just a couple of servers here and there, it's different. If it's an entire server farm that you're going to spin up, and they're also spinning up multiple other environments and multiple other projects, you're going to need to deal with all of those as well. So planning your journey really is a big key aspect to success. Start off with mapping your current landscape. So where are we right now? What version are we on? Figure out where obviously you're going to want to get up to 10.4. There probably isn't any reason not to get up to the latest version unless there's something which is extremely critical that causes a big conflicts. I do occasionally see people saying, hey, we're upgrading from 9.0 to 9.2 or 9.3, and they obviously have their reasons, but I always wonder, like, why are you only upgraded to 9.3 instead of 10.4? They're typically, like we have seen in a long time ago, I'm talking like a decade ago now, just to show some of my age and experience with some of these things. It used to be very difficult to upgrade. So upgrading was a multi-step process. So if you were on a 6.0 and you want to get up to a 6.6, for example, you'd have to go from 6.0 to 6.1 to 6.1.update4 to 6.2, and then maybe you could jump to 6.4, and then maybe you can skip 5 and go to 6.6. And then there was a lot of similar stories between the 7s as well, 0s, 1 and 2s, and the early phases of the 8s as well. You had to go through these multiple steps to do an upgrade. That has been gone for a long time, and I think the Sitecore kind of suffers a little bit from some of that legacy historical kind of pain. Vast majority of the time, you can be on 8.0 and 8.2, and you can jump straight up to a 10.4. And if you can't jump straight up, there are definitely techniques that you can use to jump between the versions. So even from a 6.0 and a 6.6, to give you some examples, because we know we've been talking to some customers that are on these early versions, you can jump to a 10.4, and there are some ways to do that, and we'll talk about that. You'll obviously want to figure out where you are, and that does involve looking at your current code base, understanding what modules you're currently using or not using, as a case may be, and what integrations you have, and specifically understanding that code base to figure out how those integrations have been made. Those integrations that have historically been introduced into Sitecore, because it's such a extensible platform, how those integrations were made is a large part of how quickly you can upgrade. And that's nothing, and unfortunately, that's nothing to do with Sitecore's own code base. And again, it suffers from that, from a bad rep as a result. It's just people have made integrations in a way which might not have followed the best practices or following Sitecore's own patterns for making those integrations. And then if you're on XP, you're going to want to figure out what you want to do with your XDB and your analytics data, because that is a separate upgrade step. Much easier these days than it has been historically, but you just need to figure out the plan and the roadmap for doing that. and from that determine what does my new environment look like? What do I have right now, and what does my new environment look like? Can I keep the same environment right now? Do I need to spin up a new set of environments? Is it going to scale from this set of web apps to this other set of web apps? And then map all of this to your target platform, which should be, like I said, 10.4. But map those and map how those features are going to go from those old things to the new things. What are we going to do with the analytics data? Are we going to upgrade it? Are we not going to upgrade it? If you're in a much older version with web forms and marketers, for example, which was widely used on the 6, 7, 8 versions of Sitecore, and you need to move to the new Sitecore forms, what does that mean, and how are you going to get there?
One more thing, Cam, before we move on that point about the XDP and analytics data, right? From what we see, very often customers decide to just drop the data, leave it behind, because it's on low quality and not worth of time investment. But if you properly configured all of that and you store a high quality data with 10.4 right now, Sitecore provides the tools to migrate it even to CDP if you want, right? So this is another reason why it's worth to think about moving to the newest versions of Sitecore. Yeah, just wanted to add that.
Definitely.
Yeah, the strategy. I mean, or the ways the upgrade can be handled, right? So the first one, probably not so popular, but it's still possible. So in place upgrade. What does it mean? It means that you try to use the existing environments. You do the upgrade in a way like a release of a new feature, right? So you just upgrade the solution, upgrade the code, install the required packages, whatever is needed, whatever steps are required and documented by Sitecore. What is important to do that in place, you probably need to be very aware of your solution state. You should be trust. You should have trust in your solution in the code, and probably also have some high test coverage to identify all possible issues that can show up after the upgrade, right? It may not work. The in-place upgrade may not work for larger solutions when some of the libraries are deprecated, because you obviously need to rewrite some of the code that you have, and when you have multiple stakeholders, right? Because when you do this in place, you do the upgrade all of one. I mean, all of the sites, all of the applications or solutions or websites are upgraded at once, and it may not work with the stakeholders' expectations. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. This is the more popular case that we see, which is upgrade on a new infrastructure, and it's probably more popular because it's safe. It gives you some time to see what is happening. Yeah, so what are the steps, right? So it starts with the clean greenfield setup. So you have new infrastructure, possibly also a more efficient one, or simply adjusted or prepared for your new architecture if you plan to do some changes during the upgrade. It seems to be a better strategy if you want to clean up the sites. So you have a chance to actually clean up the code, clean up the databases, and set it up from scratch. So it also builds your awareness of what is inside your Sitecore solution. It's more secure, also because of the reason that I already mentioned, right? But you build that trust in a solution because you know what is inside, right? You move those pieces carefully. You did the upgrade in a way that you have a full control over everything that you're moving. That's why it's more secure. It also a better way of dealing with the upgrade when you host hundreds of sites, and we've seen cases like that. because when you have multiple stakeholders, they can have some changes in process, right? So they are building new sites, or maybe they are applying changes to existing sites. So you cannot just interrupt the process of release for stakeholders for the business requirements by the upgrade, right? So with the upgrade on a new infrastructure, you upgrade what you can, and then when the rest of the changes are ready, when the rest of the sites that were in progress were released, we are moving those after the main shift. Yeah, it's probably worth to mention that it might be, or usually it is more expensive because of the infrastructure cost, but it is what happens when you work with really complex and large scalable solutions, right? So this is a price for security, I guess, and flexibility that you have with that approach.
Yeah, I think the rollback, the switchback, as you said, is usually the biggest factor here, right?
Yes, yeah. So if something goes wrong, you can always switch the DNS configuration and be again online with the site that was working okay, right? Yeah, I think we can move on to the next slide, which is upgrading from a very old version. Do you want to start with that one, Cam?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the specific use case here is we have actually been speaking with a customer that's still on Sitecore 6, which is one of the first versions that I started working with. This is how old it is, and the upgrades from that older version is more tricky, right? Because it's not this one package that it can just update and everything is good. The crazy thing, the good thing, crazy thing is you can actually still use that exact same code base from the Sitecore 6 instance on a 10.4. And we're talking about old technology, obviously. Sitecore, it'll be Microsoft Web Forms, ASP.NET Web Forms. And Sitecore even supported XSLT, if some of you recall, way back then. And those will actually still work on the Sitecore platform on a 10.4, which is just a testament to the platform, its backwards compatibility and the support it provides. But if you are coming up from such an old version, I think then you need to start considering your strategy. Well, do we just want to take that existing code base and put it onto 10.4? Do we want to actually, if we're going to do this upgrade, what are we just taking the content? Are we taking the code base? If we're doing both, then how do we do it? Because you don't want to go through all those upgrade steps. And this is where you can start, thinking about, do we just migrate the templates and the content to the latest version? Think about what platform you were on. If you were on even a 7, for example, if you were on an XP and you're moving, if you haven't been using those XP features, then do we do what we deem the side grade, right, and move across to Sitecore XM? We know that platform, it has all of those core CMS features, all of the page editing capabilities. It does have some personalization capabilities built in, and you can actually hook some of those personalization capabilities into your own rules engine, custom rules engine code as well. So you don't get that longer running analytics, that personalization, but you do get in session and custom personalization that you can add in. So it has a lot of those great features in there. So you do really need to consider, do I go to XM, to the XM platform at that point? But also consider, do I at this point make the shift and move over to a headless platform like XM Cloud? And we know that again, to Sitecore's testament and original great architecture, in my opinion, you can take content and templates from a Sitecore 6 instance and actually migrate it up into XM Cloud, and the content and the templates and everything will be there. Still a good opportunity to review those things, but you're not going to have to go through all of that pain of the content migration and scripts and things like that.
But this is just an option. You don't have to, right? You can stay on Sitecore as long as you really need to or want to.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. So the upgrade is not always a challenge. There are also opportunities, but we will go through all of that right now. So one of the challenges is content migration. So here based on experience, we can like make you think about things like distinguish types of the content, right? So you will use different approach to migrate your content for the pages when the content is related to the pages, when it's related to the data sources, media items, or forms. All of those needs a little bit different approach and some awareness. And that awareness is related, for instance, to the environment-specific data. So some of the forms, for instance, or some of the configuration items might be different on dev, QA environments and different on production. So you cannot just take it from your local and install on every single environment, right? So all of that has to be documented. You need to be aware of those changes that has to be made. The thing that is very often missed are the save actions on the forms level. So people just taking forms like a standard data, standard page where everything should look exactly the same. And, forms looks exactly the same, but the save actions work differently, right? Because they have very often some configuration on the level of the save action. They can have a different recipients defined, for instance, right? So those things happen, and those things are very often mistakes of the teams that are working on the content migration during the upgrade. It is also worth to remember that the serialization is there to support us, right? So if you don't have serialization, you should have it. That's a sure thing, because it will help you to maintain the templates and all of that. So the things that should be exactly the same on every single environment, right? We've seen cases also when serialization was there, but wasn't used for years, or was like outdated in a way that wasn't any longer usable, right? So fix that and then move to the upgrade step. I wouldn't probably start upgrade process without having properly set serialization. You can also use the content packages to increase the control level of your migration. So instead of getting, I don't know, a backup of the database and putting that on a separate server, you can use the content packages to move side by side or piece by piece to know exactly what you are moving to from one environment to another, or from old environment to the new one. And it will increase your security, it will increase your awareness, and at the end of the day, will make it work, right? The last point from the list is some kind of trick that we used during one of the upgrades. So we had an SPE, so a Sitecore PowerShell extension. Yes, Sitecore PowerShell extension with some PowerShell script in it that was connected to two databases and was comparing two databases from old and new environment to show us differences. And we did that because of the because of the fact that there were like many stakeholders applying some changes on the old environment, and we wanted to keep up with those changes on the new one. And it wouldn't be possible when you have globally distributed teams that very often do not communicate with you to like be up to date with everything, right? So to be sure that we know about all of the changes, we had that SPE script to help us with it, right? So that's kind of trick. All right, I think we can move on to the next one, which is about the integrations. So here we start again with the with configuration and the environment specific things, like configuration files and configuration items. So the items we already discussed on the level of the forms actually from the previous slide, but the configuration files, right? So what we very often observe is the configuration being applied directly on the servers, for instance, right? Or configuration prepared without the roles that are available on the newer versions of Sitecore, right? So we can have role-specific configuration added to the same file, and just filter out by the role of the environment on the file level. So you keep everything well organized, easily manageable in a single file, even for a specific website, which gives you control over it, and again gives you security because you understand what you are doing. You don't have multiple files spread across multiple folders. You have everything in one place, well organized. So if you have that set up correctly, everything will go fine, probably. Yeah, the next thing is also very often case. So when you do the upgrade and you decided to use a new infrastructure for it, so the most popular case, right? We very often observe that connections are closed, ports are blocked, infrastructure team doesn't know what to do, right? So you will be in the middle of all of that. So make sure that you inform people what you expect, right? You should be aware actually of the all of the connections that are that should be opened between the Sitecore nodes like CD, Xconnect, CM, and so on and so on, even on the database level. And the same applies to the integrations, right? Because if you set up a new infrastructure, there is a high chance that integrations that were working just fine on the old environment will not work on the new one because connections are blocked. And yeah, the last point is about purely about the networking. So something that I already mentioned, right? So make sure that connections are possible. Yes, the code base and modules. Cam, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, sounds good. So we mentioned, obviously, take a look at the current state of the code base. Some code bases are a lot better than others. Some are more equal than others, equally, right? Again, it's a good opportunity to create some clean architecture and design around the solutions. A lot of the projects we've seen have been using Helix architecture, which there's very good implementations of the Helix architecture and there's very bad implementations of the Helix architecture. We've had some code bases with over 350 projects within the single solution. It's a nightmare to work with. It's slow, it's cumbersome. Everybody is just doing things everywhere. That alone actually does make the upgrades much harder because you're now having to upgrade potentially 350 different projects. So if you can, take the opportunity to clean some of those up. Take a look at what Sitecore modules you're using, and what third-party modules you're using, which ones are still supported, which ones are not still supported on both fronts. Web Forms for Martyrs was the obvious one, what we mentioned from a Sitecore perspective, but there's a number of others that have that are no longer supported, for example. And there's the same with the third-party modules. I've worked with a lot myself, where over time they were, maybe it's a redirect module or this module or that module. And if anyone remembers that old marketplace that Sitecore had, modules would just not get updated. For a number of years now, we have refused to actually work with any third-party modules that are not, where the source code is not openly shared, for these very reasons. At least if it's an open source or openly available module, you can go and make those updates or make the switch to understand the code. The types of serialization used, so if you are using TDS like a lot of older projects were, then good opportunity to make the switch over to Sitecore content serialization. If you're on Unicorn, then it is still supported. So again, just figure out if you want to make the switch now or in the future, but it is a good opportunity to make those changes. But it would depend on the size of the current project and the solutions, and if, as Lucas said, serialization has been used and if it has been kept up to date. And figure out what other customizations you have within the solution, how they were done, as I mentioned earlier, and try and determine what the breaking changes are between the versions of Sitecore. Sometimes that's easier said than done, and sometimes this is where the experience comes in, and that oh, I've got some code that does this. I know this is gonna come and bite me and cause some headaches during the upgrade.
To the point of serialization, one more thing, right? Because even when Unicorn is still supported, right? It won't be supported by XM Cloud. So by staying on it, you are closing yourself to for an option that is out there. But again, it depends on your strategy, on your plan. If you want to be like fully supported, or you want to use solutions that fully support also by the Sitecore SaaS offering, then Sitecore CLI, Sitecore Serialization is the way to go.
Next page.
Yeah, so multiple stakeholders. Partially, I already discussed that, right? So what we very often see is that I mean everyone is aware of that, right? So business has their own requirements, and you can have your own plan, but then business comes and says that, guys, we have to do that differently, or we need to change an order, right? So this is one of the challenges that you probably will need to deal with. Uh, so if you even plan the code freeze or code freeze, what we really recommend to do when you plan also the upgrade process, it might be changed. And for that particular purpose, it's probably better to go that the upgrade strategy, or choose the upgrade strategy with the new environment, because you will be less it will be less problematic actually to change the plans, change the strategy of releases when the stakeholders decide that there is a need to release something which is critical for the company, for instance. But after challenges, at the end of the day, there are also opportunities. So it's not always a problematic thing, right? So let's say let's look at on the brightest side of the upgrade. So it's a chance for you and the company actually to improve the governance. If you use the rules or the suggestions that we shared with you, you can improve your security, general awareness of everything that you are doing. You can improve the processes, right? Because every member of your team will know what is happening, where can be the process improved. You can document all of that and share that across your team, and as also teams, external teams that you are working with. You can improve your development standards because it's a great chance to tidy up your solution, right? Tidy up serialization that we also mentioned. And you can reduce the technical debt, which means that you're getting rid of old things that are still in your solution, but weren't needed anymore. And upgrade actually opens you a chance to do that, especially because you will be running the tests anyway, right? So with small additional effort, you can actually do a great job on the different levels too. So the new release strategies, again, this is something, one of the really important opportunities, right? Because we very often observe that companies, and it is really hard to believe in that, but still do the deployments manually, right? With the new infrastructure, you can also set up the CI/CD pipelines. You can start doing those things automatically. You can have optimized artifact prepared. So instead of doing or deploying everything, you can have like artifacts prepared just for you with all of the data, or just this data that you really need to release, which makes the releases quicker and easier to maintain. With that all being said, you can also leverage the blue-green deployments. We'll not get into the details of it. I hope you know it. If not, you should. And at the end, last but not least, decentralized package management is something which, with relatively small effort, gives you really a great performance, because all of the builds, even locally, and also for CI/CD, will be done significantly quicker. So it saves your time, and also with that, you will have a better control over the nugget packages that are used across your solution, which you will value the most when you have a really large solution with multiple sites.
And you'll also value when it comes to the next upgrade, of course, right? Because that
Oh,
makes
yes.
it a lot easier.
Yes, because then you just change the number and it's out there, right? Yeah, overall stability, right? So once again, performance on every single level, from development to the release to the website itself. If you will, if let's assume that you have a large site with multiple sites, you will be doing tests, right, for every single site, and especially for the integrations, things like that. You will see, or you for sure identify missed issues, right? So something that you were thinking that is working, uh, you will find out that it doesn't work anymore, right? But no one was actually looking at it because that was something released many months or years ago, right? So it helps you to identify those and fix those. Improve the team member onboarding. So it's Cam, can you support me with this one?
So one thing we have noticed is we walk into these projects, we walk into these upgrades, and they have no documentation, right? So when there's a new developer, it's like, hey, go set yourself up, and nothing is in place. You can definitely improve your team member onboarding just through this process. You can improve your own processes, get proper documentation in there, set up SIF scripts if that's a local instance that you're setting up. We have been, for the vast majority of our projects, at the very minimum, setting up Docker scripts so a developer can come on board and just use containers on their local development at the minimum. A lot of customers are still not ready to go into containers and Kubernetes for production infrastructure, but it does give you a quick way of having a repeatable local onboarding and setup process for developers. And then obviously just at the same time, you're modernizing your entire platform up to the latest version with all the different features. There is just inherent stability built in with the latest versions of Sitecore, with a huge number of bug fixes, stability fixes, code refactoring that they've done in the backend for making the platform more responsive and performant.
All right.
And with that, we're kind of heading towards the end. So I would say, if you haven't done upgrades before, work with a Sitecore partner. It does hugely help reduce the risk and to remove uncertainty. You remove the cockiness that I had when I was first starting up with these upgrades, thinking it can just be done. And I've seen this throughout my career with a lot of other developers, and they come into it, they're like, oh, okay. Having that experience and that knowledge going into upgrades now, we know what we're going to get into. We know what to look at before the upgrade even begins to plan this. And actually, having done some of the upgrades, our future upgrades are actually so much more easier because we've set those processes up in place. We've cleaned up the code base as much as we could at that time. We've set up some of the CI/CD pipelines. We've refactored pieces of code where we're like, if you did it this way, it's actually going to be done in the correct Sitecore, using the correct Sitecore practices. And that alone will just make future upgrades a lot easier. Some of the projects that we've done recently, where they are smaller projects, but you're talking about upgrades, talking about days rather than weeks and months. Some of the bigger projects, which were taking several months, can be done now within weeks because we've done that work in the background. We've done that work previously to the stage. That alone gives you that long-term stability, those patterns for the growth, for the development, for changes that you're making to the platform. And especially if you're setting up some of those CI/CD pipelines, that's just going to make your everyday life just way easier. There's a couple of resources that you can look into. We do have a white paper available that talks about some of the issues at scale, some of the issues we've discussed here and more. And we also did host a webinar a few months back when 10.4 was released, talking about specific features of 10.4. And we've done this previously for 10.3 and earlier versions of Sitecore as well. You can find that on our LinkedIn page and our YouTube channels. But here are the QR codes for links to those specifically. And with that, we'll head into questions, and I'll give you some contact info while we talk.
Wow. A lot of considerations, guys. One question coming up from this. So upgrades are still a very important thing. For the last couple of years, we've been hearing about this very pure headless thing, right? And Sitecore does have a lot of composable headless products. Why are upgrades still something so prominent? And also to that end, how should a customer, maybe on a somewhat newer version, maybe I don't know what that would be considered, I don't know, 8 or 9 plus, how do they assess, let's do the upgrade, or let's look at going composable?
I think it's going to come down to need. A lot of customers are happy with where they are with the platform, what they built. They're happy with the Sitecore on-prem install. Some customers actually do require on-prem installations, whether that's regulatory or just internal reasons. Sometimes XM Cloud actually isn't available in the region that you need it to host in. We have customers in Canada that need hosting in Canada, and you can argue that whichever way you want, but that's a requirement. That's what they want. So they do require something that's installed essentially within their cloud instance. Sometimes customers don't have a need for headless capabilities really, because we talk about omni-channel, but a lot of customers are still web only. Maybe they need something in the future, but they're not sure. Not even that they're not sure, they know they're not going to need it for a very, very long time. So they can still stay on-prem, they can still get those headless capabilities. You can still be on-prem, on Sitecore JSS, and if you need some scalability, you can buy the Experience Edge. People have inherent assets built up over time. They have teams built up over time with specific skill sets, and they're not quite ready for that jump to headless and XM Cloud, or they don't see the requirement for that type of capability right now. SaaS is great. Like we love the upgrades and the updates and feature enhancements that come inherently with SaaS. But that's not the only consideration that you've got to make.
I would add one more thing to this, right? Sitecore is still one of the best products on the market when it comes to the DXP space. So if you are on an older version, it really makes sense to upgrade, use the newest tools that Sitecore provides instead of doing replatforming, because it's almost impossible to find something better right now.
Yeah.
And
obviously within Sitecore's own space, Matt, we talked about this with the XM Cloud Plus talk that we did previously. Sitecore's cloud products are extremely well integrated. To the point they're still separate products, but they almost act like a single product when you need it, right? Because it's just a feature that you just enable and you have it within that same system. We've seen with a lot of the issues with the composable headless spaces, it's lots of separate products that are kind of a little bit disjointed. And we've been seeing within the industry at large that people are actually moving towards what we call the race to the middle. We talked about this recently. And the headless vendors are saying that, customers do want a visual page editor. They do want to be able to personalize from within the same tool set. And Sitecore, on their platform, DXP, their XP system, has had this since a decade. They are, as Lucas said, they are the leaders within the space. And with that, it gives you 100% autonomy to go and customize exactly what you want it to do. You want it to personalize based on a criteria from some obscure CRM system that no one's heard of, or some database that you have internally. You can do that with Sitecore XP and the rules engine that is built in.
Well, that was great. I think it's a good primer heading into Sitecore Week here, Symposium, MVP Summit, Partner Summit. Look forward to seeing you guys there, and we look forward to seeing the community at large.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the announcements that Sitecore make is. I know there's a lot of enhancements around AI. And we do know that they've been making, and we've seen this over the previous releases of Sitecore 10 especially, they've been making this platform more and more open, more and more extensible. And yeah, hopefully I'm looking forward to it, to seeing what integrations become available from the XM XP platform into those composable spaces. Lucas mentioned that you can actually migrate Sitecore XP analytics data into CDP, for example. So you can now start to really mix and match on-prem capabilities with cloud SaaS-based capabilities. So I'm looking forward to hearing some announcements. And if you're going to be there, as we mentioned earlier, give us a shout, send us a message. We're looking forward to meeting up with the community.
All right. Lukas, thank you as well.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye-bye.